I'm Ann Shaftel, and I'm a professional art conservator. I spend half the year working for big museums all over the world, and the other half working for remote monasteries. I'd say that my approach is consistent because it's based in science. Preservation science is very important because that's what art conservation is based on, preservation science. Let's apply that to examining this Thangka. If I were an art historian, I would say, oh, this Thangka is from this date, and it was painted in this region, and it's worth this amount of money. But that's not what art conservators do. We talk about the condition, and the reason is because we want this Thangka to last for not just this generation, but for 5 generations in the future, so that people in the future can get inspired by it. Let's examine this Thangka, its condition. This Thangka has some of the condition problems that many old Thangkas have. It has damage in the painting support, and all of these folds and creases come from it being rolled and unrolled in its past when it was used in the monastery. And these days people are still storing Thangkas rolled when there's no need for it. In the past, Thangkas were rolled up and put on the back of yaks to travel. When the monasteries traveled to different meadows and regions, these days the teachers go on first-class airplanes and don't need to bring their yaks. So there's no need to roll the Thangkas like that. If this Thangka had never been rolled and unrolled in the hundreds of years it existed, it wouldn't have any of this damage. As for the textile surround, it also has suffered from being rolled and unrolled. A lot of the textiles have some problems according to the age. In other words, a lot of very old Thangka textiles came from Ming and Qing dynasty robes, court robes, the blue, and that was deficient in the warp and weft. So the warp threads would break in that blue silk. So you often had a lot of damage in the blue silk that older Thangka paintings had as their mountings. This, however, is torn like that probably because of rolling and the way it was handled when it was rolled. Another condition of this Thangka is there's some water damage. Water damage was very, very common when the monasteries had old stone walls. And the water would flow down, and then you'd have water damage from the back. Thangkas also get damaged when they're in a trunk or just stacked up in the monastery and there's a leak in the roof or something like that, or it's monsoon, etc. You can see how the red color has migrated over through the other colors. The Thangka covers are really important, and one reason is because the weaving technology of this fine gauze-like silk is no longer available. The looms are gone, and people really don't weave it like that anymore. And so when Thangkas began to be collected by dealers, the dealers would just rip off the covers because they didn't like the idea that they were covers. So many Thangkas, then Western collections, have no covers. It's really good to see a Thangka mounting with its original cover. And every time you raise it and put it through the string that holds it up, it tears a little bit more. In other words, the Thangka form is like sculpture. It's 3-dimensional, and every part of it is 3-dimensional. And every part of it gets damaged just from the life of a Thangka. Unless you want to frame it like a museum and keep it in a sterile atmosphere. Thangkas from monasteries do get damaged. One thing we do is we shine a light from behind. The light just changed. Earlier this afternoon you could see it. And the light from behind can show you if there's any serious cracks or tears in the painting. When you look from the front, you just get distracted by the iconography because it's so interesting. Another thing about this Thangka mounting is that it has these that are still here. Again, when they began to be collected by art collectors, they would just tear these off with the cover because they didn't want to occlude the painting. From a Western point of view, in the Western aesthetic of art, Only the painting is interesting. If you go to an art museum, paintings are considered high art, but textiles are just considered craft. But a Thangka form has both. The full Thangka form is three-dimensional with the painting, the textile, wooden dowels top and bottom, sometimes metal finials, sometimes wood, and leather. This has leather to hold it up. The leather has been known just to break without announcement. So whenever I see leather, I run an invisible thread to help hold up the Thangka so that it won't crash into the floor. These corners are put there, either leather or cloth, to keep the top wooden dowel from poking out and tearing the Thangka mounting. That's what they're there for. So I've been working with Thangkas since 1970, and that's a really long time. I first saw Thangkas when I was 8, on a class trip to a museum. Again, I work with Thangkas as an art conservator, and it's my honor to be available to monasteries and great teachers to help let these Thangkas remain stable in condition so that they'll remain for generations way in the future, 5 or 6 generations, so those that come later can be inspired by them.